result of those. I've also done a little bit of checking around in some other communities to try to find out how other places in our same size deal with a fire code and then enforcing and administering it. So the memo was sort of the result of those conversations in a pretty simple question and answer format, just to give everybody a sense of what it is and how it would work. You'll see that the recommendation is, if council wants to further explore it, I think some more discussions with Director Yance would be in order, and then possibly even, some more discussion. I put out there, we could do that at a goal setting session, or it could just be a discussion item at a future meeting. So with that, I'll take questions, and Director Yance is here. I'm sure he keeps a good source of information too.
Do you have anything to say, Mr. Yance? Chief, I'm sorry.
Other than I will say that as my visits just like around the city in our coverage area, I am amazed at what things I stumble upon on as far as fire panels not in working order, car batteries daisy chained together so phone systems don't lose power. So I think as far as the safety aspect, both for our citizens and firefighters, it's something that we definitely need to look at. And these are just, I'm not even looking, these are things I just have stumbled upon.
So I have a question for you. Here it says several NISA staff members have achieved certification. At this time, how many do we have certified, and is NISA have a plan in place to certify more? And then how do you plan on, I guess, because I know NISA covers not just the city of Williamston, the other surrounding communities. How do you plan on making it work? Because that's a lot of people's questions, like how is this gonna work?
Correct.
It's not, we know we need it, but how's it gonna work?
We currently have 2 people certified, myself and one other, Lieutenant Holmes, and then we have another gentleman that's been through the class but hasn't taken the test yet. Basic inspections can actually be done on a, we'll call it company level, meaning the fire crew or the ambulance crew that's on duty could actually go and kind of just do a look through a building with permission. I mean, we don't just barge in and say, we're here to do this. There are rules in place stating that we have to do it at a reasonable hour and those type of things. So initially I thought we would more or less be handling it kind of like on a complaint, at least to start out with, if we've had certain areas that we've had complaints. But as I've been stumbling upon these pretty serious issues, I'm thinking more it's gonna kind of have to be kind of a blanket, at least at first, to go through and check. There is some legislation that's being put forth right now. The legislation is looking to go through on the lame duck session, which I believe is actually this month, on the state level, and they're actually talking about making it mandatory that all assemblies be inspected, and that had to do with the article that was in the State Journal earlier this year about the lack of fire inspections, and everybody thought that these were being done and they weren't. If that goes through, then it's going to be put on the local departments to actually do all these inspections on assemblies. An assembly is generally any gathering place of more than 49 individuals. So you're talking bars, restaurants, churches, all those type of things. And they're talking about putting a fee in there. Now, if the local jurisdiction decides that they're not going to do these inspections, then the assemblies will be provided a list of names of state certified inspectors that they will then have to pay to come do the inspections. Now again, that's legislation. We all know how that goes. It could go good, it could go bad. And then they're talking about the next step actually being possibly schools, turning the schools over to locals, which now are supposed to be inspected by the state, but again aren't being done because the state doesn't have the manpower to do it. So we're kind of in a, this is something that we're probably gonna have to do here real soon.
So is this something like, under like how violations are handled here, I'm reading what is written here. Is this something NISA is gonna draw up a policy of how they're going to police this, and then we would be voting and adopting that along with the fire code, as you guys would be our enforcing body?
We're not doing this to go stomp our feet and say, hey, you gotta do this now. We would write a letter If it's something that's like severe life safety, then we could shut them down or require them to do a fire watch. But, you know, if it's not something that's actually vital, if it's an extension cord or, you need to get the batteries replaced in your exit signs, then that would be a more, here, this is what you need to do, write a letter, state within 30 days, we're gonna come back and check again. Thank you, and thank you for keeping us safe. So yes, we would have some policies written up on how to handle that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is I wanna see more of, we all wanna see everybody kept safe, and we don't wanna see any fatalities from fires or any fires in general, but also it's kind of how, you know, in theory it's great, but I wanna see kind of how it comes together before, you know, kind of how we're gonna pay for it, how it's gonna be enforced. It says there's an appeals process, but we're not certain how that would come together. I'm kind of like, I need to see a little more form before I can.
A lot of that information is written right into the code itself. But yes, we are at this point on a discussion.
I know,
Right.
but that's what I'm saying, it's like, in order to say we wanna go forward and do this, that's kind of where I'm at, is I need to see some of that before I can say, all right, let's do it, or
I'd like to
let's.
see how a program's written out or laid out, how it's gonna function, and, I mean, I know that gets into the operations of NISA, and I totally understand that, but it just, people are gonna ask those questions.
I
I've had them ask,
totally
well,
understand.
how are they gonna implement a fire code and then police, you know, and it's stuff to explain to people actually what NISA is, and, you know, so.
Correct. But again, a lot of that is actually spelled out in the code itself, as far as how the appeal process works and how, occupancy is determined, all that is spelled out in the fire code, and we can definitely put more stuff down in writing in like a packet form.
You know, to me, it's pretty obvious there's a definite need, and, you know, we're talking, we don't know how much money, but, I mean, we have to start looking into
Right.
this,
Well,
that's all there is to it.
Here's the other thing,
I agree, but at the same time, how much money, and how,
We
you
don't
know,
know.
that's what I'm
That's what we
saying.
have to
We're trying
that's what we have
figure
to
that out.
explore, but here's the other thing, we have a burning ordinance for, you know, open burning in a fire pit or whatever, has to be screened with a spark arrest, but NISA right now does not have the authority to police that. You see what I'm saying? That falls on our police department, and that's one of the things we're adopting this. I know there's a lot spelled out, but I mean, we all are gonna have questions, and we would all have to see that, and it's a lot of reading, I'm sure.
And the pay for the inspections would actually come from the owner of the building or the person.
See, that's one of my,
And as far as the state, and this, we had talked about it, when Corey and I had talked about it, and, you know, we were hoping that we can do this at no or very little cost. But then the state is talking about this mandatory fee on assemblies, and so I hesitate to say it's not gonna cost anybody anything, because if the state pushes this through and there is a cost, then everybody's gonna be saying, hey, you guys said, and
see, that's what I'm trying to figure out, and I agree, we need it, we want everyone to be safe, but at the same time, we don't know where the margin some of these businesses are working under.
Correct.
So,
Would it be fair to say that NISA write a program and along the line saying, yes, this is the fire code we're adopting, but these are our fees and these are our procedures and how we're going to handle it, and have something like that to present to us, I think would answer a lot of our questions. You know, it'd knock out a lot of that fine reading that we'd have to get into, and like, you know, exactly what the fire code is. And then, obviously, in this letter here, it states that, I believe it is the Village of Weberville. They're having a reading on the ordinance, you know, I'd like to maybe see what their ordinance is, a copy of that, you know? And then that would, cause I mean, it's not just the city, but it's the surrounding areas, and NISA's part of protecting all that, and I hate to say this is kinda NISA's business as well as the city's business.
And again, we've just been at the discussion.
Right.
The discussion stage, so. And with this legislation has really just come about over the last couple weeks, so that was even happened, I think since Corey and I had the chance to speak.
So I think the board is getting the feeling we'd like to move ahead, but we want more information as we move ahead. So that's
Right, I mean, I'd hate to sit here and say, yes, we're gonna adopt this policy and then have,
Yeah,
who knows
that's
how we're gonna
interesting.
enforce it. Yes, it's in the fire code, but yet it, you know, I'd like to see something spelled out.
Yeah, this is kind of a big deal. It's, you know, it's a huge safety deal, but it's also giving, and I'm not saying anyone would ever abuse, it's giving more powers to the fire department than they have now, and I think they would totally use those correctly, but at the same time, we wanna see what we're doing as we're doing.
You know just as well as I do, somebody's gonna come in here and we're gonna have a 2-hour meeting over their issues.
And again, that's what the Board of Appeals is, and one question that I've had, as an authority, we're kind of different than a lot of other, it's not just the city, other areas, municipalities, it's a little easier for them than us because we have this big umbrella. And what we're trying to find out is if we can do it with one Board of Appeals, or whether we have to have a Board of Appeals for each different jurisdiction, and I have not been able to get that answered.
Well, and all the people that were listed as I was reading through that part that for its general, who generally makes up a Board of Appeals, it all made total sense. You know, you've got contractors on there, you've got firefighters, you've got electricians, all people that know all the safe aspects of that. But I was also wondering, just because, you know, I don't know how this would work. I don't know who our building inspector for the city is, who goes out and does inspections on new builds or whatever. But because NISA is our, what is it, what they call it, our inspecting authority or what?
Authority having jurisdiction.
Yeah, I'm like, would we want someone, obviously somebody qualified, but someone from the city on that Board of Appeals that's, you know, that's the kind, I know I'm getting into the nitty gritty here and we're just discussing, but that was something I had thought of, but.
Yeah, that's a good question, if you can do the membership of that board based on local preferences, or if it's a hard and fast. I think that's something we're still
My
kind of.
understanding is it's a recommendation, but
Okay.
for those specific titles that would be in there.
So Corey, as stated in your letter, I think it's a great opportunity to put that on for goal setting. Work on this morning with goal setting.
Is there,
Is that a feasible time frame to get some of that information, maybe, like, by December 5th?
I would think so.
gives us about 2 months, so. But yeah, I think I've got some pretty good notes of the types of questions that need to be answered still. I think the other thing about waiting until December is if this legislation goes through, that could change the whole thing, so.
The state has actually been looking at adopting a state fire code, but every time they try, it just.
Yeah, implementation of it and
Right.
everything, yep.
And again, if you read that article, that was in the Lansing State Journal, it talked about, you know, the state fire marshal's office kept asking for funding. Legislature kept turning it down, but they were also being told that the locals were actually doing these inspections when, and actually it's not been happening.
And I'll just say one other thing, I didn't put in a recommendation or anything, cause I truly felt it was worth discussing and getting some input on. But just from one experience that I've had, in a prior community in a different state, but the International Fire Code is international, and we had that down there, and the fire inspection program ran really well. In fact, the fire department often was the department that knew just about every business owner in town, and they did it in a very facilitative way. Obviously, you had some bad actors out there that they got a violation and they had to correct things, and those are never fun. But having seen it run in a professional way, I do think there's a lot of benefits to that. And Mike and I have had some really good discussions, and obviously there's a lot of questions that we still need to dig into. Primarily being cost, and then how is it administered, and so we'll continue to work on getting those answers and try to bring something back in December.
Is that something we really wanna bring to a council meeting though? That's something that I think we should discuss where we could take a lot of time to do it, cause this is not some willy-nilly little thing, this is a big thing. I'd like to see, you know, I'd like to see a separate meeting of anybody that's interested in knowing what's going on,
Well, the
not
December-
bring it to council.
Right.
We could be here next
December
Tuesday.
fifth meeting is the goal setting.
Right,
Is
it's
the
a special,
what?
it's a
Goal
goal
setting.
special meeting that we're gonna discuss that, it's not council. it's a
I'd
full-
still like to see this separate, this is too big a thing to,
Well, you could also, the council could put together a subcommittee to help stall it. There's a lot of different ways that you go to work on it to bring information back to us.
well, I'm sorry, this, you know me, fire department's my life, and I just want it to just go right, okay? I want it to help.
I think we're all in agreement, so we
Yeah.
need something, we just need to have the information
Okay,
spelled
but
out.
like I say, can't bring it to council and just, at a meeting, and I'd like to see something, I know we're having a groupie thing, but I mean, this is something different. This is not just, you know, talking about, so, does anybody have any suggestions?
The only suggestion I have is, what Corey suggested was that the next step will look for December fifth to have more information.
Well,
and we'll
yeah.
continue to keep going forward.
Okay, okay.
I would say at that meeting, we could make a determination if we need to do a committee or something with that and bring it up at the next council meeting. What date would that be for you after the fifth? Sorry, I'm feeling confused here.
We could do a special meeting.
Right.
We could do a special meeting just on that.
So it would be,
It's not
well,
important.
the next Monday, the tenth would be your meeting, so. The week following the fifth, that next Monday. We meet on Wednesday for our goal setting, and then the following Monday, we make that motion.
So what do you guys wanna do? What do you guys wanna do?
Just move forward, delegate to Corey to move forward and give us
Okay.
information and keep us coming.
Okay, are any more questions then? For either the chief or Corey? Okay, let's go, we don't have any correspondence, but, I'm gonna go back to NISA. We had a very sad day today, we laid to rest another fireman. Gaylord Risch was one of the nicest people that I've ever met in my life. The church was overflowing, standing room only. It was, he was an amazing man, and he's gonna be missed. That's all. Department head reports, city manager.